Imagine waking up one morning, checking your email, and seeing a message that changes everything. The subject line reads, "Important notice. Your insurance provider has ceased operations." At first, you think it's spam, a scam email, or maybe some marketing trick. But then you read further. Your insurance company, the one you trusted for years to protect your home, your car, maybe even your family's health, is gone. Bankrupt. Overnight. What would you do if the very safety net you've been paying into for decades suddenly disappeared? This is not just a story about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about real people, real families, and the fragile thread of trust that ties us to companies we believe will be there in our worst moments. Let's step into the shoes of one man. His name is Daniel, a middle-aged father living in Manchester, England. Daniel worked hard for everything he had. His house was his pride. His wife and 2 children were his world. Like many responsible people in both the UK and the US, he believed in protecting his future. That's why he never missed a single insurance payment. But what happens when the protection you paid for is nothing more than a promise that disappears overnight? Would you still trust the system if the system itself failed you? Daniel first noticed something was wrong on a cold January morning. He tried logging into his insurance app to check a policy update. Instead of the usual dashboard, a red banner appeared. "Service unavailable. Please try again later." He brushed it off, assuming the app was down. But later that day, his friend sent him a news article. The headline struck him like a punch. Major insurance provider declares bankruptcy. Thousands left unprotected. His insurance company. Imagine paying thousands of dollars over 20 years, only to find out it was all for nothing. At first, Daniel thought the government or regulators would step in. After all, wasn't insurance supposed to be one of the safest industries? Wasn't it tightly regulated? But as the hours passed, the reality set in. His policies were gone. His coverage vanished. And while the government had systems in place to protect some claims, the process was slow, complicated, and filled with uncertainty. In the USA, the story was no different. Families in states like Florida, where hurricanes strike with brutal force, were suddenly left without coverage. People who had just filed claims for storm damage discovered their insurance company had collapsed before paying them a single dollar. In the UK, homeowners dealing with floods and rising repair costs faced the same nightmare. What would you do if disaster struck tomorrow and your insurance was already gone? Daniel sat at his dining table that night, staring at the paperwork he had kept neatly filed for years. Every document, every receipt, every policy renewal suddenly felt meaningless. He remembered the promise his insurance agent once made. "We'll always be there for you, no matter what." But promises mean nothing when the company no longer exists. What made this collapse even scarier was how quickly it happened. One day, the company was praised in financial magazines, boasting about profits and customer satisfaction. The next, it was gone. Analysts later explained it was due to risky investments, poor management decisions, and the rising wave of climate-related disasters draining reserves. But explanations didn't pay Daniel's bills. Explanations didn't rebuild the homes of American families devastated by storms. Here lies the heart of the lesson. Insurance, at its core, is about trust. And when that trust is broken, it leaves more than financial scars. It leaves emotional ones too. Daniel's children asked him that night, "Dad, are we still safe?" How do you answer that question when you yourself don't know the truth? Would you be able to look your family in the eye and say, "Don't worry"? If your protection was gone, the fallout spread fast. News channels were filled with angry customers, shocked employees, and government officials scrambling to reassure the public. But reassurance didn't fix the immediate problem. Thousands of people in both the UK and the US now had to search for new coverage. And here's the harsh reality. When one insurance company goes bankrupt, others raise their prices. The entire market reacts with fear. Suddenly, policies cost more. Coverage shrinks. And the very people who need protection most are left vulnerable. Daniel tried to apply for a new home insurance policy the next week. To his shock, the quotes he received were almost double what he had paid before. Why? because his neighborhood had recently suffered flooding, and the bankruptcy of his previous insurer made companies more cautious. He was paying the price for mistakes he never made. Is the insurance industry truly protecting us, or is it protecting itself? But this story isn't only about despair. It's also about resilience, about how ordinary people respond when the ground beneath them crumbles. Daniel began researching. He learned about government guarantee schemes, financial ombudsmen, and how policyholders could sometimes recover part of their claims. He discovered community groups where people shared advice, legal guidance, and emotional support. And in the U.S., consumer watchdogs began calling for stricter rules to prevent companies from collapsing so suddenly. Lawmakers debated new protections, arguing that in an era of climate change, cyber attacks, and global instability, insurance companies needed stronger safeguards. Yet, as Daniel listened to these debates, he couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. Why were these measures being discussed now, after the damage was already done? Why wasn't action taken years earlier, when warning signs first appeared? Do we only fix problems after lives are already shattered? The night ended with Daniel sitting quietly, reflecting on how quickly security can turn into uncertainty. The insurance he thought would always be there was gone. The safety net had holes, and tomorrow was filled with questions he couldn't yet answer. But his story didn't end here, because in every crisis, there's a turning point. And Daniel's turning point came when he realized that while companies could fail, knowledge could not. The morning after the bankruptcy news, Daniel woke up with a heavy heart. He knew the world had changed for him overnight. But as he sipped his coffee and scrolled through headlines, he noticed something powerful. He wasn't alone. Thousands of people across the UK and tens of thousands across the US were all asking the same question. What now? And that's where Daniel's journey shifted from shock to action. When the system fails you, do you freeze, or do you fight back? Daniel began making calls. First, he rang the official hotline set up for policyholders. The line was flooded, wait times stretched for hours, and when he finally spoke to an operator, the answers were vague. Please wait for further updates. We're processing cases. You may be entitled to partial compensation. None of it felt secure. So he turned to his community. In online forums, Facebook groups, and even local town meetings, people were gathering. Strangers connected by the same disaster were sharing survival strategies. Some offered tips on finding temporary coverage. Others posted step-by-step guides for filing complaints with regulators. For Daniel, it was like discovering a lifeboat in the middle of a storm. At one town hall meeting, an elderly man stood up and said, "We trusted them, and they failed us. But we can't just wait. We have to learn how to protect ourselves." Those words stayed with Daniel. Because in truth, insurance is not only about policies and payments. It's about resilience. It's about being prepared when the unexpected happens. Do you rely on others to save you, or do you prepare to save yourself? Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in the U.S., families were facing the same nightmare. In Florida, a woman named Sarah had just lost her roof to a hurricane. She filed her claim, only to discover her insurer had collapsed before approving it. The storm destroyed her home, and the system destroyed her hope. Her story made headlines, sparking debates on news networks. Experts explained that the rise in natural disasters, stronger hurricanes in the U.S., more frequent floods in the U.K., had pushed insurance companies to their breaking point. Claims were piling up faster than reserves could cover. And when one company collapsed, it sent shockwaves across the market. Daniel read these stories with a mix of fear and determination. He realized this was bigger than his own problem. It was part of a global challenge. And while governments debated long-term fixes, ordinary people needed immediate solutions. If the storms are getting stronger every year, can the safety nets we trust really hold us anymore? Daniel decided to take control of what he could. He began researching financial literacy, disaster preparedness, and the fine print of insurance contracts. He discovered that many people, himself included, had signed agreements they barely understood. Hidden clauses, exclusions, and limits were buried in the documents. And when companies went bankrupt, these weaknesses became painfully clear. He shared his findings with neighbors, friends, and even online communities. Soon, Daniel wasn't just another victim of the collapse. He was becoming a voice of awareness. He told people, don't just pay for coverage. Understand it. Don't just trust the brand. Research the stability of the company. And always have a backup plan. Would you rather learn after losing everything, or prepare while you still have the chance? As weeks turned into months, new insurance providers slowly began filling the gap left behind. But the terms were harsher. Premiums climbed higher, deductibles were steeper, and coverage was limited. It became clear the true cost of bankruptcy wasn't just the loss of one company. It was the ripple effect it left across the industry. Daniel faced tough choices. Should he pay nearly double for new coverage, or take the risk of living without it? In the U.S., many families faced the same impossible decision. Some went uninsured, gambling with fate. Others tightened their budgets, sacrificing daily comforts to pay for protection that felt less reliable than ever. This was the new reality of 2025. Across world where disasters struck harder, companies failed faster, and trust became a rare commodity. If tomorrow's world is full of risks, how do you protect your future today? One evening, Daniel's son asked him, "Dad, why do we even need insurance if it can just disappear?" That question cut deeper than any headline, because it wasn't just about money. It was about faith in a system. Daniel answered carefully. He explained that insurance, despite its flaws, was still a shield. But he also taught his son something new. Never depend on one shield alone. Build savings. Strengthen your home. Stay informed. And most importantly, never believe that someone else will always rescue you. Maybe the real insurance is knowledge, the kind no company can ever take away. Daniel's story became a lesson, not just for his family, but for anyone listening. In the UK, regulators introduced stronger consumer protections. In the US, states pushed for tougher laws to ensure companies had enough reserves to survive storms. But beyond policy changes, the real shift happened in the minds of ordinary people. They began asking harder questions. They began demanding transparency. And they began preparing, not just waiting. The bankruptcy of that one company became a warning bell for millions. A reminder that even the strongest institutions can crumble. A reminder that trust is fragile. And a reminder that the future belongs to those who prepare. So, what does Daniel's journey teach us? First, never assume stability. Companies, governments, even economies can change overnight. Second, always educate yourself. Read the fine print, understand the risks, and know your rights. And third, build resilience, not just financially, but emotionally. Because when systems collapse, it's the strength of people, families, and communities that carries us through. Would you survive the collapse of your safety net? Or would it collapse you? By the end of the year, Daniel had rebuilt a new safety plan for his family. He secured new coverage, started a small emergency fund, and joined a community preparedness group. Life wasn't the same, but it was stronger in a different way. And as he looked back on that cold January morning, when everything seemed to fall apart, he realized something powerful. Sometimes the worst events force us to discover the best within ourselves. So, let me ask you directly. If your insurance company went bankrupt tonight, what would you do? Do you have a backup plan? Do you know your rights? Or would you wake up tomorrow as unprepared as Daniel once was? Don't wait for disaster to test your safety net. Take action now. Learn, prepare, and protect your future. Because in a world as unpredictable as 2025, security isn't given. It's built.